Everyone, this is Ashley Elenbaas with Sky House Herb School and Apothecary, and today we are looking at, this is a second part of our video series where we're looking at the connection between the moon and herbs. And this is a great series if you're an herbalist and you want to learn more about astrology, or if you're an astrologer and you're interested in plants, or if you're just someone who's interested in all things plant, herb, planet. You'll find this hopefully to be very helpful. This is part 2, so I do recommend that you listen to part 1. It's going to give you a lot of context for this particular class in terms of how do plants experience the effects of the lunar cycles, and how does herbal harvest, how is that affected by the pull, the gravitational pull of the moon. So you can check that out and have a listen. So I'm going to screen share and we'll take a look at some slides. I do want to say that we are starting a course, my first course that I've been teaching since I started my sabbatical last year, called Roots and Spheres. So if you're interested in learning more about the connection between astrology and herbs, we'll be doing a full year-long course where you will get plants, and we will tell you which plants to take each month, and these will line up with very specific planetary transits and lunar influences. So if you're interested in that, you can learn more on my website, skyhouseherbs.com, my husband's website, nightlightastrology.com, and all of that information will be in the description. So let's dive in right now to what is this connection, starting with the new moon. So the new moon is a time of quiet. It's a time of new beginnings. And it's really, I think of it's like what's hidden. It's a time of seeds, and both seeds and us internally, it's a good time for us and our bodies to rest. This correlates to the winter solstice in the solar calendar. So if you think about the darkest day of the year, this is the new moon. It's the sort of the darkest, the new moon is the darkest day of the lunar year, or the lunar calendar, in that particular phase. So think about the relationship between the darkest, deadest night of winter and this time of the new moon. Things are quiet, they're peaceful. There's a lot of yin energy, which is very receptive. And so during the new moon, our psyche is probably a little bit more open to what is in the subconscious, what is below the surface. So if we can take extra time to rest and hibernate and do less activities that are more outward putting of our energy, we'll gain a lot from the energy of the new moon. This is also a very fertile time, and a time where it's a really nice time for planting new seeds. And this could be new seeds literally in the garden, but also just new seeds creatively. So the sun and the moon are conjunct, which means that they're together. So we can't see the moon in the sky because it is right in front of the sun's face. So it's being blocked out. We can't see it because it's being blocked out by the light of the sun. And so when the moon is in this place, it's really the time of like the spark of a new seed or a new idea or a new cycle. And really, literally, this is the start of the new year, in terms of the solar cycle. And it's a time of a new creative cycle in terms of the moon. And I love this image of the bear hibernating. I mean, this is perfect for the new moon. Things are quiet, dark, receptive. Everything is being stored. There's a period of waiting. And this is what we want to do. We want to find deep quiet and fertile rest. Now, after the moon passes out of this newness or this dark phase, it starts to grow in its light. We call this the time of the crescent moon, when the moon is 45 degrees ahead of the sun. And we're heading towards the first quarter moon, when the moon looks halfway full. And this is a time of germination. And if you've planted seeds, literally planted seeds into the earth, then this is when they're going to start to germinate. This is when the action, the water, the magic of darkness and wetness and stillness creates some movement deep inside of that seed. And the same thing goes for us. This is a great time to water those ideas that you have. You don't want to act on them yet. This is not a time of action. It's a time of watering, mothering, gentle nurturing, and waiting for that next time to come up. Again, one of the key qualities of this time is gentleness. So just think about how a mother bear takes care of her tiny cub. That is the gentleness that we want to have with ourselves and our ideas, and the gentleness we want the earth to have with these new seeds in the ground. Next, what we have is the moon is 90 degrees from the sun, or squaring the sun. And this is that first quarter time. And often this is referred to as a crisis in action, because this is the time when the sprout, or you could see the seed, has to break through the shell of the seed around it. So this image is great. It's this little chickpea seed starting to pull its way out. This is the hardest part of the cycle, is this action. I've got to do something. It's that poem by Anais Nin. The moment came where the risk to stay tight in the bud, or where it was more painful to stay tight in the bud than the risk that it might be to blossom, or something along those lines. So you get what I'm saying, though. It's like it's more painful to stay in a closed and still place than it is to actually take a risk and move forward. So this is the time in the moon cycle where the plants are doing this. If you've planted them, they are starting to say, okay, I'm going to stretch out, break through. And this is also when we start to say inside of ourselves, I think I know what I need to do. I think I know it's time to grow. It's time to move. It's time to take some action. The next thing that we hit is that phase of the gibbous moon, when the moon is about 135 degrees from the sun. We call this a waxing sesquisquare, or you can just think of it when the moon is heading towards that full state. And this is when things are really taking off. The image of the flowers tight in the bud, just blooming, pop, 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 right? So everything is really taking shape into its fullness. So the first quarter, we could think of that as the spring equinox, right? When we hit that moment in spring where the days and nights are equal, and then everything starts to take off into growth season. And so here, as we head into the full moon, we can think of the full moon as that summer solstice, the longest day of the solar year. And so what we're doing is we're growing into that full day and that fullness. And so it takes a lot of courage, a lot of rapid growth. So this is the time in the cycle where you see a lot of that activity. And so there's a surge of growth, of action. Lots and lots of feeling like you're almost to the finish line. And then when we hit the full moon, ta-da, it's like we've reached maximum opening. We're 180 degrees from the sun. We're opposite the sun, and we have this full expression. And this is, again, we can think about the culmination. We might be feeling like we've culminated an idea. We've expressed something. And the funny thing about life is that it's not always neat and tidy. It's not like you have a dream every new moon and it reaches completion every full moon, but it might take several cycles. So let's say in January, you planted an intention for that first new moon. And then maybe it takes 3 full lunar cycles of growth and contraction until it reaches that full moon moment where you really reach a full completion for that particular idea. But I want you to watch for this, because this whole first half of the cycle it's a building phase. It's an expansive phase. The second half, which we'll talk about in the next video, is a contractive phase. So there might be several of these necessary, even within a plant growth cycle, certainly within trees and deciduous plants and our perennials. It can take many, many cycles for them to reach a state of fullness. But we're also going to be seeing that here on a smaller level every time the moon reaches fullness. So I created this little chart for you all because I thought it might be helpful. What are the qualities, and then what are the planting actions? Like, what is it that you guys can do as herbalists or as budding growers or farmers to utilize the energy of the moon? And we're going to be talking next about the zodiac signs and when the moon moves through the signs. But for now, let's just go through this. So when we hit that new moon, that quiet time, things are quiet and fertile. We want to plant our seeds. So 2 days before the new moon is ideal. And then for medicine making, you just want to chill. This is not a time to be really active. I know a lot of people like to make medicines on the new moon because it is true that the lunar energy and the lunar gravity will pull things out as the moonlight expands. However, if you want to get the most out of your medicine, you need to harvest it around the full moon when the medicine potency is at its highest, at least in the above ground parts, right? Everything above the earth. So for me, I think of the new moon as you just rest your pretty little self. Just don't do anything. Take your own quiet time, journal, plan out what you might want to harvest. And then when you reach the full moon, that's really when you're going to feel probably more inspired anyway to take action. But it's certainly not, it's not going to make a bad medicine. It will make a decent medicine to make it on the new moon to help draw it out. But again, I would rather the plants be in their full potency than have the tincture process be in its full potency, right? And I like to leave mine in for usually 2 full moon cycles. So I get that full potency pull twice over. Okay. So that's the first new moon phase. Then when we go to that crescent phase, or that first 7 days of the cycle, this is that gentle nudging. And this is when there's that equinox, where there's that equal action of above ground growth and below ground growth. And this is a good time if you have a tincture from the last cycle, shake it up, get it moving. If you've dried your herbs, test them. This might be a good time to store them, put them away. But, again, really things are growing and taking shape in your garden, and that's what you want to be letting it do. Then when we hit that crisis of action, get out there, start weeding, really water, especially if your plants, or if the moon is in the sign of Cancer or Scorpio, or Pisces, you can really give them a good thorough watering, get the weeds out of the way. And again, you might want to start harvesting things, maybe not on the first quarter, but after the first quarter, all the way up to the full moon. That is your primo harvesting time. So if you want to be very specific, you can harvest your leaves and flowers when when the moon is in a water sign, or for roots when the moon is in an earth sign. So that could be a nice thing to do. But really, I would say, the best thing to be doing during those 7 to 14 days up to the full moon is watching to see when things are ready to be harvested. And I'll show you a little bit more detail in the next few slides. Then when we hit the full moon, this is a good time to tincture. And I should say for medicine making for this whole time too, is I love making my medicines from fresh plants rather than dried. So again, this time, if you're going to be harvesting fresh plants and tincturing them, awesome. That's great. You can also dry your plants during this time. And it's good to harvest your plants if you want to dry them when the moon is in a drying sign. So like Sagittarius is best. Leo's pretty poor for everything. You kind of want to say, I'm going to let everything sit in Leo. But, Virgo is a pretty good sign for doing that. And then also Capricorn, which is an earth sign, is a good one for drying. And then the last one would be... So we've got Leo. Oh, Aries. Yeah. So Aries is a good one, especially for fruit, because it rules the head. So things that get really big and heavy, especially up top, that's, harvesting those in the sign of Aries is really good. They'll preserve very, very well. All right, now how about, I just wanted to show you this picture. So I'm not going to go through all of it because it's a lot, but I just want to show you how cool this is. So this is showing when the moon is in Aries. These are the activities you do. You look at things and maybe you set them on fire. I can't tell what he's doing here. or this is not Aries, this is Aquarius, sorry. So this is Aquarius, the water bearer. So what is he doing? I can't really see what he's doing here. So Pisces, here's the two fish. This is a great time for sowing the earth, for planting seeds. Now we move into Aries. Aries is a good time for chopping stuff down, cutting off heads, things like that. We move into Taurus, which is a very fertile sign. This is a really great time for planting and pruning and harvesting. It's a really fertile sign for harvesting. And because it's Venus ruled, it's a really good time for planting very fragrant herbs and things that are very beautiful, like flowers. That's why you can see the flowers here. And so it goes through here. So this is when, and it shows sort of like how ideal it is. So Aquarius is pretty, let's see. Oh, this is how hot it is, I think, with these different amount of light here. But I just thought this was really neat how you can see these old images of how they, here's Scorpio, a very fertile sign, a really good one for planting seeds, Libra for harvesting. So I just love this. Leo, good for fence mending, but not much else. But here's probably a little bit more of a helpful guide. And this is going by the elements. So I did a whole series on the qualities, hot, cold, damp, and dry. That's a really good one if you're interested in learning about how to use herbs in your body, because you really have to understand the plant energetics and pathological energetics in order to match them up really effectively. But here is a really quick way of understanding how the signs relate to the elements. And then this does relate to why a lot of plants are associated with very specific signs. So we have our water signs, Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio. Good time for harvesting succulent things, leafy things, above ground material for making your herbs. Our earth signs, Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo. Good time for harvesting and working with roots. Again, remember, the earth signs are a little bit more dry and earthy, so there's a little bit more of a density to it. So any below ground materials, it's a good time to harvest. When the moon is in an air sign, Aquarius, Gemini, Libra, they're pretty barren and dry, but since Libra is associated with Venus and flowers and beauty, it's actually a pretty good time to harvest your flowers, your fragrant plants. Then fire signs are really good for removal. So we have Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So when the moon is in these signs, think about weeding, harvesting, burning your fields, right? Things like that, working your compost pile. However, Sagittarius is actually a pretty good one because it's ruled by Jupiter for preservation. So it's dry, but it's also expansive. So it'll help your herbs expand and dry out a little bit more efficiently and effectively. So it's kind of helpful, isn't it? If you think about it, I have a friend who has a company called 4 Element Herbals. I'm gonna probably put a link in here for you guys. Her name is Jane Crawley, and she does an amazing job she does biodynamic farming. She grows all of her herbs by the moon, harvest by the moon, by the signs, uses the Farmer's Almanac, and she makes some of the best high quality herbal oils and tinctures. So that's something that I'm going to recommend for those of you looking for herbs, is check out 4 Elements Herbals. She's based out of Wisconsin, so really close to me in Minnesota. All right, now here are the signs in, specifically, and breaking them down to tell you what's good for what, okay? So I highlighted Cancer and Taurus because they are the ideal signs for doing any herbal work, especially for planting or harvesting and medicine making. So if you find that the moon is in one of these signs, go for it. Obviously don't harvest something if it's not ready, but once the moon moves into these signs, it's a really good time. But with Aries, again, not ideal. It's very dry, barren. It's ruled by Mars, but it can be a good time for being a martial person or like a warrior and spray out, spray with your non-toxic bug, bug killer or aphid, whatever it is you need to use to get rid of bugs, because that's a real problem when you're gardening. I don't like killing things, but if you start eating my chamomile, I'm going to spray and I'm going to get rid of you. So sorry guys. And same thing with weeding. I don't like weeding because I feel bad. I'm like, oh, aren't you cute? I'm like, especially because I know their names. I'm like, oh, man, feverfew, I'm sorry, you gotta go, or whatever it is that pops in. But you gotta get rid of them, because if you don't, your garden, the plants that you want to grow will not thrive. So do that under the sign of Aries the warrior. Scoop them out, take them out, do a nice thorough weeding, especially when the moon is in that first part of the cycle, because during the second part of the moon cycle, the roots are going to get deeper. There's more energy going downward. So while the energy is moving upward towards the full moon, get those things out of your garden. Taurus Venus rule. This is a pretty productive one. It's a little bit on the dry side, but it's really excellent if you want to plant roots and trees. It's like the ideal sign. When the moon is in Taurus, it's the ideal time to plant trees. You also can plant your flowers for hardiness. Taurus is a very hardy, it's the sign of the bull. So think about, if you want to plant your zinnias and it's spring and it's like, when do I want to put them in? Well, do it around Mother's Day when the moon is in the sign of Taurus. And then also, again, harvesting roots, this is a good time. We have Gemini, which is Mercury ruled, dry and barren, not very good for planting or transplanting, but good for weeding. It's an Aries sign. And you can use that airiness for drying, and that can be helpful. Cancer and Pisces are sort of our best, our top two. And then Scorpio is high up there too. Cancer is moon ruled, and it's the most fruitful and bountiful sign. And it's also in the exaltation of Jupiter. So it's really expansive. I mean, everything that grows well under the care of the mother sign of Cancer. So if you can plant your seeds, you'll get a pretty reliable blossom and a pretty reliable crop for that year. Also, if you're transplanting things, this is a great time to transplant to yield good crops. Also, roses do really well when planted and transplanted under the sign of Cancer. And this is also a really good time when you have Cancer full moon coming together around the same time for making medicines. And I have some cheat sheet dates for you guys for 2023 at the end of this. So stay tuned. I have some useful facts at the end here. All right. Now, Leo, ruled by the sun, most barren and dry. Pretty much everyone says lay low. Just, destroy things like weeds and roots if you need to cut trees down, do things like that, but don't harvest or plant or do things like that with Leo. And then when the moon is in Virgo, this is a Mercury ruled sign. It's moist but barren, not recommended for planting or transplanting, but good for cultivating or destroying. And Virgo is seen as, what's interesting about all of this too is that when we look at fertility as well, a lot of women many moons ago and still to this day will also look at when the moon is in certain signs for fertility. So if a woman knows she's ovulating and the moon happens to be in Taurus, Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, that's a really good sign. Also, moon signs can tell you a little bit also about your own body's fertility. So if your moon is in Virgo, you might tend to have more problems with fertility than if you have a moon in Taurus, Cancer, and these other ones as well. All right, Libra, I highlighted that one because it's Venus ruled. It's not really great for it's not as moist as the other since it is an air sign, but it is fairly fruitful. But this is a really great sign to plant your flowers and herbs for fragrance and beauty, to also harvest your fragrant herbs when the moon is in this sign, especially if you want to dry them because it's an air sign. We have Scorpio, which is Mars ruled, and this is next to Cancer for fruitfulness. So if you plant your seeds during a Scorpio moon, then this is going to bear really good fruit or a really good crop. It's also a nice time for irrigation and deep watering and when you harvest your plants under the moon in Scorpio, then it's really good for juicing them. You're going to hold a lot of that vital fluid, and it's also really good for tincturing. We now move into another fire sign, Sagittarius. This is Jupiter ruled, often considered barren, but some people like William Lilly, who was sort of a Renaissance herbalist, he thought he was actually quite prolific and actually not a bad time for fertility and planting, because of the Jupiterian, jovial, expansive quality of Sagittarius. But typically, again, fire is not the ideal sign for planting, but this might be a good time for harvesting or drying, or even harvesting food that you're going to eat right away. That would be a good moment. Then we have Capricorn is Saturn ruled. This is an earth sign, fairly productive, similar to Taurus, but a bit drier. This is actually a really good sign when the moon is in it to plant bulbs, flowers, and herbs for hardiness, just like we did with Taurus. With Aquarius, this is Uranus ruled, somewhat barren, good for cultivation and extermination of pets, good harvest time, especially for drying. And then the last one here is Pisces, ruled by the moon, excellent, excellent, very, very fertile, similar to Cancer, really good when the moon is in Pisces to plant your seeds, to transplant things in the earth, and to harvest any herbs for tincturing. So, these slides might be helpful to come back to. And again, I just put everything in a tiny little graph for you here if you want to take a screenshot or a photo with your phone and hold on to this when it comes to planting season. Now, what is going to be very helpful for you? To me, I'm a Taurus, so I'm all about what is practical, what is earthly, what can I use? So I wanted to give you some dates for 2023. So right around Mother's Day is typically when it's safe to start sowing seeds. And unless you're sowing like brassicasias or things, then those can be sowed earlier while there's still frost. But in terms of planting, things that are sensitive to frost or like transplanting things into the earth, you want to be a little bit more cautious. So I was thinking that for this year, the new moon on May 18th and 19th is going to be in the sign of Taurus. So the new moon, it happens on the 19th. So the day before, the moon is in Taurus as well. So this would be a great time if you're going to be planting your planter boxes with pansies and whatever flowers you might be planting outside. Also, if you're going to be planting things that you want to see blooming in June, July, get them in the ground during this particular new moon. It's going to be very fertile. Then when we look at the next few cycles, harvesting herbs is going to be a really good time to do it when the moon is in Scorpio and it's waxing. So it's building towards the full moon. Again, all the potency of the above ground parts will be at their peak June 1st and 2nd. So get out there, harvest your above ground parts and herbs, and make your medicines with them. Then on June 3rd and 4th, we have a full moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius might be nice because we can start to harvest things that we don't necessarily maybe want all the juices in. So you might want to harvest roots for tincturing during this time. I just thought, gosh, when the moon is in Scorpio, a fire sign, that's going to be, a water sign, that's going to be a really good time to really get the most juice and the most fragrance and everything out of the above ground parts. But when we hit that full moon in a fire sign, we're going to lose a little bit of that juicy potency. So, you can still harvest things. I'm not saying don't do it, but it's just not going to be quite as ideal, especially if you want things that have a lot of fragrance in them. Then when we go forward, we have July 16th and 17th. This is the waning new moon in Cancer. And so I thought, hey, if you harvested your roots in the full moon on June 3rd and 4th, or if you've harvested plants to dry during this time, then why not go ahead and start making medicines out of them? I'm sorry. That was June 18th and 20th. Okay, back up. So we have June 3rd and 4th for harvesting roots. July 16th, the following month, we've got another full moon. This one's in Cancer. So remember how we talked about Cancer being like primo? Okay, so if you are around July 16th and 17th, grab your herbs and make your tinctures, harvest your roots. This is going to be a great time for really anything. I wrote roots, but really it could be anything because it's going to be such a fertile time. Now let's go down to medicine making. I threw June 18th to 20th in here because we have a new moon into crescent moon in Cancer. And again, remember, Cancer is really fertile. So if you had harvested any herbs and dried them earlier on in the summer, so maybe that June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, now June 18th to 20th, now I would utilize that new moon for putting things into a tincture and then letting that energy pull it out. So that's, again, these are just ways of thinking about it. You don't have to do it this way, but these are just some ideas. I'm going to recommend for all of you to check out these resources. So the Farmer's Almanac is available online. It is chock full of amazing dates, times. It'll tell you exactly what to plant. Plant onions on this day, plant your rutabagas on that day, plant your sage on this day. It's very specific. And if you want to see the moon, the attributes of the moon, you can look those up too. And there's tons of articles on the farmersalmanac.com website. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely check that out. Also, biodynamic farming can teach you a lot about how to grow, harvest, and make these really cool. I worked on a biodynamic farm when I was in my 20s in Costa Rica. And we would make these big barrels of this moon juice that would only could be made on certain days of the lunar cycle, and you had to stir it a certain number of times. When it was really cool. But that is a whole practice that is really synced up with these ancient traditions of mapping out the moon and the signs. And then this book that I mentioned in the last one is also a very helpful guide. It's called Planetary Planting by Louise Riot. And so it has it's just a very simple guide that can help you. And it gives very specific details, especially it's really mostly for vegetables, doesn't have a lot of herbs in there, but you'll get a sense of how things work in terms of planting and harvesting. So that's it for this one. I hope this was helpful and interesting. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please click the subscribe button. Please like it if it was helpful for you. And if you are interested in roots and spheres, a moon circle, please join us. Registration is open now, and we do have a lot of need-based tuition options. So if you are not sure if you can afford it, take a look at our need-based options and find a price range that works for you. And you can learn more about that at Nightlight Astrology, Sky House Herbs, and some links will be included below. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. And let me know if you have any questions, if everything made sense, if you have your own experiences in working with the planetary cycles and the lunar cycles with your own creative processes or your own gardening processes, just tap a comment in, let me know. Let me know what you're thinking about, or even just give it a thumbs up. That always helps too. And I will be back next week and I'll release another video and we'll look at that second half of the cycle, all the way from that full moon going down and back to the new moon. So thanks everyone. Have a good day.